Lyra had never imagined that her life of order, control, and prestige could end with a human. In the grand halls of her palace on Vorin, she walked with the confidence expected of a Vorinian princess. Her armor gleamed faintly in the low light, its designs intricate, a symbol of her noble lineage. She moved as if the world belonged to her. In many ways it did. Her people respected her, feared her, and depended on her decisions. She had been trained since birth to rule, to fight, to think ahead of everyone else. Nothing in her education had prepared her for this. A cold summons from the Vorinian Council had shattered her routine. She entered the chamber where the elders waited, their faces grave. Her father, the High Commander, rose from his seat, his eyes fixed on her with a stern intensity she had not seen since her childhood lessons in obedience. "Lyra," he began, his voice firm, "you have broken the code. The law is clear. You will face the consequences." Lyra's chest tightened. She had always known her father valued discipline above all else, but she had believed her understanding of the rules would protect her. She had not intended to break the law. She had only acted as any intelligent Vorinian would when confronted with a minor political dispute. Yet the council had judged her actions reckless, unworthy of her status. "The sentence is clear," the eldest counselor said, his tone heavy with finality. "You will be bonded in marriage to a human. This union will serve as both punishment and example." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. A human? Her mind raced. The Vorinians had long looked down on humans as fragile, unrefined, and unpredictable. They lacked the strength, the speed, and the mental discipline of her kind. To be forced to live with a human was a punishment she had never imagined. When the human's arrival was announced, Lyra found herself standing in a reception chamber, waiting. The doors slid open silently, revealing him. Ethan. He was taller than most humans she had seen, with a calm demeanor that immediately caught her attention. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, but there was a softness to them that contrasted with the steely hardness of Vorinian society. Ethan bowed politely. "Princess Lyra," he said in a smooth voice, careful, measured. "I am honored." Lyra's lips pressed into a thin line. "You should not be," she replied coldly. "You were assigned this marriage as a duty, not a gift. Remember your place." Ethan did not flinch. He simply nodded. "I understand." Her anger and indignation simmered as she led him through the palace corridors. She noticed his steady gaze, the way he did not waver under her scrutiny. He did not seem afraid, nor did he attempt to charm her. For a moment, Lyra felt a flicker of curiosity. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but perhaps some were different. Their first meal together was quiet, tense. Lyra tested him with questions about his home planet, expecting hesitation or weakness. Ethan answered every question with honesty, no matter how trivial, and with a certain confidence that unsettled her. He did not compete with her or attempt to dominate the conversation. Instead, he listened carefully, showing respect while still expressing his own thoughts. For days, Lyra struggled with her emotions. She wanted to reject him, to assert her dominance and remind him that he was her inferior. Yet something about Ethan's calm resilience unnerved her. She found herself noticing small things. The way he repaired his own suit with precise skill. The way he adapted quickly to Vorinian technology. The way he moved through the palace as if he belonged, even though he clearly did not. One afternoon, while inspecting a training ground, an alert sounded across the palace. A fleet of raiders from a neighboring star system had appeared near the planet's orbit, demanding tribute. The council mobilized defenses immediately, but the raiders' ships were faster than expected. Alarms blared and the palace shook as distant explosions echoed through the atmosphere. Lyra's instincts screamed for action. She was trained for combat, strategy, and leadership, yet she found herself momentarily paralyzed by the chaos. Ethan, surprisingly, was already analyzing the situation, pointing out weaknesses in the palace defenses and suggesting countermeasures. You're a soldier, yes?" Lyra asked, skepticism in her voice. "Yes," he replied simply. "And a human soldier doesn't just rely on technology. Strategy matters. Observation matters. Timing matters." Lyra watched, fascinated, as he directed some of the palace drones to reinforce vulnerable sectors, coordinated patrols, and devised escape routes in case the attackers breached the defenses. His approach was not just methodical, it was creative, adaptive, fearless. When a small squad of raiders landed near the palace gates, Lyra instinctively moved to confront them. Ethan followed without hesitation. Together they fought, not as princess and guest, but as partners. Lyra marveled at his instinctive timing, his ability to anticipate the enemy's moves. He was human, yes, but his courage and intelligence rivaled that of even the finest Varynian warriors. After the attack was repelled, Lyra found herself in an unusual state. Her body ached, her armor was dented, but her mind was alive in a way it hadn't been for years. She realized she had been so focused on her own strength that she had underestimated the value of another kind of power. The human kind that relied not on tradition or rigid training but on quick thinking, intuition, and courage. That night, as the palace settled into uneasy quiet, Lyra and Ethan sat in one of the observation chambers. Outside, the twin moons of Vorin glimmered against the dark sky, casting a soft silver light. Ethan tended to minor scrapes and bruises she had sustained during the defense. His hands were careful, precise, but gentle, an unfamiliar sensation for Lyra, who was used to strength and firmness, not subtle kindness. "Why are you not afraid of me?" she asked suddenly, almost whispering. Ethan paused, looking at her thoughtfully. "Afraid? I respect you. I don't need to fear someone who fights for what they believe is right." Lyra's heart, which had always been a fortress of discipline, felt oddly exposed. She did not understand this feeling. Humans were fragile. They should have faltered under her scrutiny or under the pressure of battle. Yet Ethan had remained steady, capable, even kind. Over the next days, she observed him more closely. He adapted to Varynian culture with surprising speed. He respected the rules but questioned them when necessary. He never overstepped boundaries, yet his presence reminded her that there were more ways to be strong than the Varynian way. Lyra tried to deny the growing curiosity she felt toward him. She reminded herself that this marriage was punishment, that she should feel anger, not admiration, but she could not ignore the way his eyes followed her with genuine attention, the way his hands moved with quiet confidence, or the way he spoke in measured tones that somehow eased her tension. Then came the moment she could not ignore. A sudden quake rocked the palace, triggered by residual damage from the raider attack. A section of the observation deck collapsed, and Lyra was thrown off balance. Before she could react, Ethan's hand was on her arm, steadying her, keeping her from falling. The touch was brief, but enough to send a shock through her entire being. She stared at him, uncharacteristically speechless. You saved me," she said finally. "I didn't save you," Ethan replied quietly. "We saved each other. That is what partners do." Lyra's heart pounded. She had never thought of herself as needing saving. She had never considered anyone her equal in strength or skill. And yet here was a human, a creature her people deemed inferior, demonstrating courage, intelligence, and integrity in ways she could not ignore. That night she lay awake, thinking. The walls she had built around herself for years, walls of discipline, pride, and Varynian tradition, seemed to be cracking. Ethan's presence was not just challenging her assumptions about humans. It was challenging her understanding of herself. She felt something she had never felt before, uncertainty mixed with fascination, fear intertwined with curiosity, anger tempered by admiration. For the first time, Lyra realized that her punishment had consequences the council could not predict. She had been forced to marry a human as a sentence, but the human's actions, his intelligence, bravery, and unexpected kindness, were awakening emotions she had long suppressed. Something inside her was stirring, something alive and unpredictable. By dawn, Lyra knew one truth. Her life had changed. She had expected humiliation, confinement, and resentment. Instead, she had found herself intrigued, unsettled, and, most dangerously, drawn to the very human she was supposed to despise. And deep down, she could not help but wonder what would happen next. If this forced marriage could become something more than punishment, if the touch of a human could awaken feelings she had never imagined. Lyra awoke to the soft hum of the palace. Sunlight filtered through the high windows, casting long, pale shadows on the polished floor. Beside her, Ethan stirred, still resting after the previous day's events. She had watched him as he slept, noting the calm expression on his face. There was a steadiness in him she had not encountered in anyone before. Humans, she had thought, were fragile, easily overwhelmed. Yet here was one who faced danger without hesitation, who adapted to her world with patience and intelligence. The past days had shifted the balance between them. The tension in their forced marriage had not disappeared, but it had transformed. Lyra found herself observing him, listening to his thoughts and sometimes, even when she refused to admit it, seeking his opinion. There was an ease to his presence that challenged the rigidity of her upbringing. A sudden alarm jolted them both. The palace's security system flashed a warning. An unknown vessel had entered Voron's orbit. Lyra's heart quickened. Raiders were cunning and persistent. This could not be ignored. She grabbed her armor and motioned for Ethan to follow. He moved quickly, almost instinctively. "We should assess before engaging," he said calmly. Panic leads to mistakes. Lyra could not deny that his approach was effective. She followed his lead as he guided her through the command chamber. Holographic screens displayed the intruder ship, a sleek, fast-moving vessel unlike the raiders they had fought before. The council would want her to act decisively, but Ethan's words reminded her that strategy mattered more than impulsive action. "We need to anticipate their moves," Ethan continued, pointing to patterns in the ship's trajectory. "They're testing defenses. They'll strike where we're weakest." Lyra's respect for him deepened. She had been trained to make rapid calculations, yet his insight revealed angles she had not considered. Together, they devised a plan. Lyra would command the defense drones while Ethan coordinated the palace's patrol ships to flank the intruders. When the attack began, their coordination was flawless. Lyra moved through the battle with precision, issuing orders, directing drones, and observing the battlefield. Ethan anticipated enemy maneuvers, giving her critical information just in time. They fought as a team, not as princess and human, but as equals in purpose. After the attackers were repelled, Lyra felt a thrill she had not experienced in years. Victory was not new to her, but sharing it in tandem with someone who respected her mind, her instincts, and her authority was a revelation. Later, in the quiet of the observation deck, Lyra and Ethan reviewed the battle. She noted the way he analyzed mistakes without blame, how he sought improvement, and how he respected her decisions while offering his own insights. "You are different from what I expected," she said, her voice softer than usual. "I could say the same about you," he replied. "I expected a proud, untouchable leader, but I found someone willing to listen, to adapt, and to trust." Lyra's heart skipped. Trust. She had never truly trusted another being entirely. Vorinian society emphasized control, perfection, and self-reliance. Yet here she was recognizing that she had relied on Ethan, depended on his instincts, and felt a strange relief knowing he was at her side. Days turned into weeks. Life on Voron settled into an uneasy routine, with Ethan learning more about Vorinian technology, culture, and diplomacy. The council watched him warily, skeptical that a human could understand their ways. But Ethan's humility and intelligence earned their respect gradually. He never flaunted knowledge, never disrespected tradition, yet he quietly proved that humans could match Vorinians in thought, courage, and resourcefulness. Lyra observed him closely during these days. She noticed the way he adapted to Vorinian diets, trained alongside elite warriors, and solved problems that had baffled her own advisors. Yet it was not just his skill that captivated her. It was his presence. He treated her not as a princess, not as a symbol, but as a person. His patience, kindness, and unwavering calm were reshaping her perception of the world and of herself. One evening, as twin moons rose over the palace, Lyra found herself walking with Ethan through the gardens. The soft light glinted off alien flora, casting gentle shadows. Ethan paused, looking at her with a mixture of curiosity and warmth. "Lyra," he said carefully, "you've been holding yourself apart for a long time." "You don't have to do that with me." Her chest tightened. She had built walls of pride and discipline her entire life. No one had ever suggested she could lower them without consequences. Yet standing there with Ethan, she felt a strange temptation to let some of those walls fall. I don't know if I can," she admitted. "Then start small," he said, his voice gentle. "Trust is built in steps. You don't have to jump all at once." She studied him. There was no trickery, no hidden agenda, only a human willing to meet her halfway. Something in her stirred, a vulnerability, a curiosity, a dangerous fascination. She realized that she had been expecting punishment, but instead she found herself drawn to him, intrigued by his mind and moved by his integrity. A few days later, a diplomatic mission required Lyra and Ethan to travel off-planet. This was a test of both skill and trust. They faced hostile environments, unfamiliar cultures, and unpredictable threats. On the barren desert planet of Korath, their shuttle was ambushed by scavengers. Lyra drew her weapon instinctively, but Ethan quickly assessed the situation, directing her movements and coordinating a counterattack. They moved seamlessly, each complementing the other's strengths. Lyra was fast, precise, and strong, while Ethan was adaptive, clever, and fearless in ways she had never expected. Together, they overcame the threat. Lyra realized that she had never worked with anyone who challenged her in every way, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. That night, as they camped under the alien sky, Lyra found herself speaking openly with Ethan. She shared memories of her childhood, the pressures of royalty, and the isolation of being a princess. He listened without interruption, offering empathy and understanding. "You've never had someone like me before," Ethan observed gently. "I've had many teachers, advisors, but none like you," Lyra admitted. "You see me as I am, not as I should be, that is, unsettling." "Maybe it's time to be a little unsettled," he said with a small, knowing smile. Her heart responded in ways she could not fully explain. She had been trained to fear vulnerability, to suppress emotion, to rely only on strength. Yet with Ethan, vulnerability felt safe, dangerous, yes, but also alive. His touch, his words, his presence, they awakened feelings she had never experienced. Back on Vorin, the council noticed the change. Lyra's demeanor shifted subtly. Her confidence remained, but it was tempered with warmth, consideration, and insight influenced by human thinking. She no longer relied solely on rigid strategies. Instead, she integrated flexibility, empathy, and creativity, qualities she had seen in Ethan and slowly adopted herself. One quiet evening, a minor accident in the palace brought them together in a way Lyra could not ignore. While repairing a delicate piece of technology, she lost her balance. Ethan's hand shot out, steadying her. She froze at the touch, feeling a jolt of energy she could not name. It was not fear, not anger, not annoyance. It was something new, something compelling. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're welcome," he replied simply, his gaze steady. "I'll always be here to support you." Lyra's thoughts raced. She had never imagined that being forced into a marriage could lead to such connection. She had expected humiliation and resentment. Instead, she had found partnership, trust, and a growing sense of admiration, and perhaps even something deeper, though she refused to name it yet. The weeks that followed were filled with small moments that reshaped her understanding of herself and humans. Ethan learned Vorinian combat techniques quickly, not to show superiority but to respect her world. He shared stories of Earth, of its challenges and triumphs without condescension. He laughed at her dry humor, disagreed politely when necessary, and most importantly, treated her as a partner, not a subject. Lyra began to notice herself changing. She moved with less rigidity, spoke with more openness, and allowed herself to feel, truly feel, for the first time in years. She discovered that strength was not only about skill and authority, but about trust, vulnerability, and connection. And slowly, inevitably, she realized that her thoughts of Ethan were no longer confined to duty or curiosity. One evening, under the glow of the twin moons, Lyra found Ethan watching the stars. She stood beside him quietly, feeling the pull of something undeniable between them. "Lyra," Ethan said softly, sensing her presence. "What is it?" She hesitated. For centuries, she had never allowed herself to admit feelings that could weaken her. Yet now, standing beside him, she could not deny the truth. I do not know what this is," she confessed. "But it feels right. Dangerous, but right." Ethan smiled gently. "Then we face it together." Step by step, Lyra allowed herself a small, rare smile. For the first time, she felt a sense of hope, of possibility, and of partnership that transcended punishment, tradition, and expectation. Her forced marriage had become something entirely unexpected. It was no longer about duty or sentence. It was about discovery, connection, and the slow awakening of feelings she had never imagined. In that moment, Lyra understood something profound. Sometimes, the greatest strength is not in